Hello, my name is Robert King. I'd like to make a response or an addition to Phil Donahue's comments about Jehovah's Witnesses. Phil Donahue said he was an admirer of the stand that Jehovah's Witnesses have taken, particularly in regards to the no flag salute. And he rightly pointed out that Jehovah's Witnesses have done more in America to promote First Amendment rights for all Americans than any other group. So often Jehovah's Witnesses hear derogatory comments and criticisms from householders. We knock on the door, maybe a World War II veteran or someone that comes to the door and he said, "You people won't fight for your country. You don't salute the flag." And sometimes that ends the conversation and sometimes it doesn't. But for Americans, it might give them the wrong impression that Jehovah's Witnesses are somehow anti-American, and that is not the case at all. It is interesting that back during the 1930s and 40s, when Jehovah's Witnesses suffered so much persecution, and of course the United States and Britain went to war against Germany, but at the same time that Jehovah's Witnesses were being persecuted in the United States because they would not salute the flag or pledge their allegiance to the United States of America, Jehovah's Witnesses in Germany were being persecuted by the Nazis because they would not Heil Hitler. So Jehovah's Witnesses are not enemies of the state. In fact, if you think about it, if everyone practiced what Jehovah's Witnesses do as regards not supporting any nation's war efforts, if everyone practiced the faith of Jehovah's Witnesses, there would be no war. Think about it. It is very ironic that the critics of Jehovah's Witnesses, oftentimes the fundamentalists, evangelicals, Jehovah's Witnesses don't believe in the deity of Jesus. And yet these people, many of them, are some of the foremost patriots and warmongers. Has there ever been a war that fundamentalists have opposed? Jesus said, "You must love your enemy." Sometimes the state says, "No, these people are our enemies. We want you to go kill them for us." And it seems that oftentimes Christians are more than willing to do the dirty work of the government. But Jehovah's Witnesses aren't. But it's interesting. Jesus one time said, "Why do you call me Lord, and yet you do not do the things that I say?" Jesus says, "Love your enemies." Well, we throw that out the window whenever there's a war. It's interesting, though. Here Jehovah's Witnesses are accused of being this godless cult who do not accept Jesus, and yet they follow Jesus' words, and the born-agains are the first in the forefront to go fight the evil Muslims now. They're the new state enemy. Well, I won't talk anymore on that. Sometimes people that are somewhat knowledgeable of the Bible counter Jehovah's Witnesses and say, well, Israelites often supported foreign governments, and they cite the case of Daniel. In fact, you could go back to Joseph, who became the food administrator of all of Egypt. And of course, Daniel became third in command in rulership in Babylon and then in Persia as well. And you could add Queen Esther to that list. In those cases, though, Jehovah elevated his servants who were slaves in a foreign country, and he elevated them to positions of rulership. But they did not necessarily promote the interests of that government. Well, perhaps they did to some extent, but the point was that they were recognized as Jews, and it was a way of Jehovah exalting himself, showing that he was the real ruler and that he could elevate whomever he wanted to. And in fact, that's what he did with Jesus Christ. And that is the point. Jesus had mentioned that the law and the prophets were until John the Baptizer, that is. And from then on, the kingdom is what men are pressing on to achieve. So when Jesus came to the earth, he became the appointed heir of David's kingdom and the king of God's kingdom. So now those who are part of this kingdom are ambassadors for that kingdom. Paul said we are ambassadors substituting for Christ. Take the example of a human ambassador. Say the ambassador of the United States to France. He may live in France with his family, but does he promote the interest of the government of France or the government of the United States? If he promoted the interest of France to the exclusion of America, he would be considered a traitor. And that's the way it is with true Christians who are ambassadors of the kingdom. They cannot promote the interests of any nation on earth. Otherwise, they would be unfaithful to their kingdom calling. And that is essentially why Jehovah's Witnesses do not salute the flag or pledge the allegiance or whatever is popular in the country in which they live. Many of Jehovah's Witnesses have been willing to go do prison time. Even in modern times, in France and South Korea, mandatory service. Jehovah's Witnesses get out of high school, the young men, and march off to prison. How many evangelicals, fundamentalists, whoever, would be willing to do that? Think about it. Thanks for listening or watching.